greetings to everybody from the Belgrade. It is my pleasure to be today with you. I am very happy that our Ukraine Western Balkans network started to work in the full scale, so we can very easily articulate our mutual knowledge, our interest, our advocacy, and to raise awareness of this on the some very crucial and important topics which actually touching all of us, and the consequences going far beyond the horizon of the existing borders. I wanted to, in my presentation, to do some very clear parallels which allow to us to predict Russian actions in the Western Balkans, to easily trace them, and to find out what is the mutual in those actions between Western Balkans and Ukraine. It is very important to set one very clear thing, that from 2014, if you ask ordinary citizens of Serbia, what is the reason of the conflict, what is the reason of the armed rebellion in the eastern Ukraine, most of the people will tell you only the Russian perspective. The most of informations which coming from the Ukraine from 2014 are strongly Russian shaped narratives. So we should not think twice why the majority of the population in Serbia are against the sanctions, are supportive to Russia. It is very clear answer. It is not the cultural ties. It is not religious ties. The answer is the Russian propaganda, Russian operation of influence, which shaping the thinking, and we should be aware this is some kind of the cognitive attack on the pattern of thinking of the majority of population. But I would now analyze why those outcomes are present here. So as the headline is Russian hybrid warfare, similarity between Ukraine and the Western Balkans. First of all, every war has some goals, have some strategical achievements which must be done. So in the case of the Ukraine and the Western Balkans, it is very clear that hybrid warfare is not the only tactic, it is the way of the behavior of the Russian Federation. When Mr. Putin sits with the President Macron, he is in the hybrid warfare. When he sits with the Olaf Scholz or before Angela Merkel, he is in the hybrid warfare. When President Putin invites our president to the Russia, he is in the hybrid warfare. When he visited Yerevan, again, he is in the hybrid warfare. So the Russians do not miss any chance to exploit the situation towards their primary goals. One of the goals which are mutual for both for the Ukraine and Western Balkan is the prevention of the Euro-Atlantic integration in one case. Another thing is to secure the Russian monopoly on the decision making. We all remember how it started in the Ukraine in 2013. We now remember what's happening on the Balkans in the last 30 years. First of all, we should know that when Serbia declared so-called non-military resolution in the just one small paragraph, it is because the Russian interest, because in that period Serbia, after democratic changes, does not have need to continue the policy of the Slobodan Milosevic and the former evil regime in former Yugoslavia, but because the Russians has very strong interest to sustain the belt of the neutral countries in the region. Those kind of the resolution and policy of non-military alignment is actually concession toward Russian interest. And we know that from 2000 until 2022 in Serbia specifically, you do not have any political party which is the ruling party and which does not have strong interaction with the Russia and also with the China after 2006, when the first time of the MOUs was signed with the Chinese partner. We have something which is called 4 pillars of the foreign policy of Serbia, which is actually bringing in the global subjects which naturally do not gravitate to the Balkans and Serbia, but by that policy, the China and Russia became one of the pillars. Other 2 pillars are European Union and the United States of America. But those kind of the interference of the foreign policy architecture is very, very present, and it is not came by the chance. It is came by the decision of the governments. And third thing is the method of the global confrontation. Russia, as China as well, are using the third countries to confront the West. If we watch the situation in Ukraine from 2014, we can very easily see that from the beginning, they started to speak that in Ukraine, they actually are against the West expansion, against Nazis, against non-traditional values, and so on. The same thing is here. Later on, I will show the examples how they demonstrate the global confrontation in the Western Balkans. We have at least 3 cases in the 3 different countries of the Western Balkans. So we should know what is behind these activities of Russians, why they are successful. Of course, I must agree with our colleague Bojan Elek, without the readiness of the local political actors, those activities will be much harder than they are now. Because the first thing to prevent those activities, which is not in the cause of interest of the local people, is to political elites clearly take the line and put the stance which clearly separate the interaction with Russia on the one side and the Euro-Atlantic integration on the other side. We should not look so many far away to see how this should function. It is only enough to see the collective diplomacy approach of the EU member countries, which is far enough for the Western Balkan countries to protect themselves from the Russian interference. But if somebody needs help, he first must say, I need help. But what is the operational level? It is very easy to trace the Soviet legacy theories, such active measures and reflexive controls, which we call now the hybrid warfare. Somebody will call it cognitive warfare, somebody call it informational warfare, but I'm thinking that the most important thing is to know that all actions are directed by the intelligence services, led by the military way of the decision making. And because of it, the hybrid warfare is the proper name for those activities. Information operation characteristics are the only one section of the hybrid warfare, and we see it very often in the both regions. Deploying of the disinformation, deploying of the anti-Western propaganda, accent of the cultural ties which exist or maybe does not exist on the level as it was stated, and also the forced brotherhood, forced friendship. We always had a very strong efforts to prove that this brotherhood exists, to prove this friendship exists, and there is no healthy relation if somebody is forced from the beginning to always commit that the brotherhood ties exist and so on. But I wanted to make one very clear parallel with the Gerasimov doctrine. We all know his article from 2014, and by that article, it is very easily to trace Russian activities from the Western Balkan to Ukraine, to Syria, to Central African Republic, and so on. And it is very easily why I put it here to dismantle the to dismantle the foundation parts of those tactics, and then I will go part by part with the examples from the both region. So we have the use of political, economic, informational, humanitarian, and other not military measures applied in the coordination with the protest potential of the population. This is very important to know this moment, protest potential, because in Ukraine we saw that pro-Russian proxies actually used the monopoly on the force of on the streets, force the access of the arms, capability to attack regular Ukrainian police and military units. On Balkans, we have something very similar, but without use of arms so far, which is very good. Political measures. Kosovo negotiation is very good political playground for the Russia. If you remember, Russians left the UN peacekeeping mission on Kosovo, but they do not left their presence on Kosovo issue because for with very cheap resources, they held their presence by the position in the United Nations Security Council. They interfere a lot of time after 2000s, where no Kosovo negotiations can be held without consultations with the Russian counterparts before. Every government in Serbia consulting the Russia and now the China before the major events of the negotiation, which means that this putting very good leverage from the Russian side to suggest, to direct, to maybe provide some kind of the information for the Serbian side, which actually can very easily direct the outcomes of those negotiations. And also one important thing is the public statements of the Russian officials. Everybody of us remember when Washington Agreement was signed between the United States, Kosovo, and Serbia, and we remember how Maria Zakharova reacted and how she insulted our President Vučić using some reinterpretation of the famous Hollywood movie. So we know very easily how they politically exploiting the Kosovo negotiation, and they also using the negotiations to compromise the actors in those processes, but also they're using it to diminish the value of some process. On the other hand, we have also one political measure interference, which relates to the using of the Russian so-called veto against UK resolution about crimes in former Yugoslavia, especially crime of genocide in the Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Russian diplomacy ran off, maybe with consultations from the Belgrade, maybe not, I do not know, but in any case, they prevented this resolution and said, we prevented adoption of those resolutions to protect Serbian people because this resolution was against Serbian people. And after that moment in 2015, nobody read this resolution, but everybody knows that that resolution is against the Serbian people. But actually in that resolution is very clearly stated other crimes, not just the genocide, which means that crimes also against the Serbs. But that does not matter. This is one actually very good example how Russia using political measures to interfere even foreign relation, to prevent reconciliation in the Western Balkans, and also to prove that they are actually protectors of the Serbs, but nobody knows who attacked Serbs with this resolution. Another case is the High Representative Christian Schmidt, where Russia also together with China put it on the vote in the Security Council, is Mr. Christian Schmidt legal or is not legal? But the truth is that Security Council does not have anything with the appointing Mr. Christian Schmidt or High Representative, because it is already settled according to the Dayton Agreement. The rules are settled, and also the Council for Implementation of Peace is actually only one who will appoint high representative. But Russia and China made one very clear game to sabotage the appointment and actually to show, you see, we do not allow high representative. This is the way how we protect the Serbs. But by the way, it is one very big foreign policy masquerade, with actually also shaping the Russia position as protector of the Serbs. Other third political measure is the Euro-Asian Economic Union, which is often represented with the high agreements, with the no custom agreements and so on. And it is very highly published by local authorities and of course by Russians, but Euro-Asian Economic Union agreements never prove any kind of the significant result in the trading or other economical cooperation. And the fourth thing is the sublimation of all these topics and example which I showed. So we have the first part of the Gerasimov doctrine applied on the Western Balkans. This is the political measures. Economic measures, also from the Gerasimov doctrine, is present long before the aggression on Ukraine. It is present from the 2008, after the signing the agreement between Serbian state and the Russian state company Gazprom. In this agreement, actually, Serbia, for very cheap money, gave our complete oil industry and tied up our dependence on the Russian supplier, which provided to Russian very big average on the political decision making. So we have the active measures in practice very easily deployed, but we must be honest, those kind of the outcomes will not be possible without local decision-making process, and this is something which we must know. Also, this energy or economic measure came as the supplement for the political measures, because now it's very clear that this acquisition of the oil industry is actually happened because government in that time wanted to pay Russians for their veto and international activity toward Kosovo policy. So we see that...
Darko, 2 minutes, if it's possible.
Okay, I'm finishing. Okay. We have the protest potential of the population. We know the Montenegro coup d'etat attempt. We know the church protests in the Montenegro. We know support for Russian aggression in Serbia in 2020. We have use of the far-right groups as initiators of the action. So the complete Gerasimov doctrine is very applicable here in the Balkans, like it was being applicable in the Ukraine. We must know those components of action sometimes are the main activity, sometimes are support activity, and those informational measures are very well present. I must say that citizens of the Serbia mostly does not know what really happening in the Ukraine, and they only have mostly have access only to the Russian narrative. This is very example how Russia how Russia is capable to shape the public opinion through informational environment. Okay, I will be very fast. Why this is successful? It is very successful in the one nexus of the using of the opinion makers, using of this information. Then these two is support for the groups for pressure, mostly far-right and nationalistic parties. We have then the activity of information pollution, creation of narrative, and this cycle goes on with the very easily method: repeat, then add, repeat, then add. Outcomes. Okay, I think that everybody here are proficient, so we know the outcomes here on the decision-making process. What can be done? We should enhance the public and NGO partnership like it was done in the USA, like it was done in some countries of the European Union. We must urgently on Western Balkan reshape national securities, media literacy and resilience framework toward present security challenges, education of the public and media stakeholders, and continuous exposing of the Russian malign actions and deeds, which is urgent. What must be done? Clear political decision that Russia is a threat for security, peace, stability, and economy. Every citizen should have clear understanding that Russia is not a reliable partner and honest ally. Thank you so much. Sorry if I further it so long.